Have you ever tried to get so much done that you actually get nothing done, and in the end, you just feel like you're not moving the needle? That's what we're going to talk about today on the Logistics Life. Hey, everybody, welcome back. And today, I want to share more of a personal side that I've been, I guess, for lack of a better term, struggling with, maybe is a good word for it. Challenged with, realizing I had to educate myself on. And what that is trying to pack so much into a day or trying to get so much done that you actually get caught up in what it is you're trying to get done and instead of actually getting things done. And so what I decided to do is just to give everybody some context here, over the last 6 months since, my health has really started improving, there's been this desire for like a quantum leap. And you've probably felt it. You've probably been in the same position at some time or another. And what I mean by that is like, you feel like you're at this level, but there's so many levels above. It's like, how do I not just climb the ladder, but how do I like jump the ladder and hit these massive levels of productivity and success? And the reason I say this, that you've probably faced it, is because over the past couple of months that I've been back speaking to sales reps and help training sales reps, one of the big things is that, during the pandemic, they didn't really have to sell. So now it's almost this universal kind of punch in the jaw of sales, and why aren't things moving fast enough, and so on and so forth. And as you move through your weeks or your days, your weeks, your months, I find that you move and then you kind of look back and you're like, well, I was here, and say that is kind of like at a baseline level of 0 is here, and then you're at 5 when you really feel you should be at 10 or 15 or 20 on the productivity scale. So what I started to do is, because this was affecting me huge, I mean, to the point where anger, frustration, like in the end, just all out, this is bullshit. Like, what am I doing wrong here, kind of thing. And then we start second guessing ourselves. We start second guessing, what we're capable of and all these other things. And it's amazing how we spiral so quick. So what I did is I decided to go out and start doing some productivity courses, because I've read enough books on productivity, but I wanted to see, has anything in productivity changed over the last 2 years? Because as you know, with the integration of more tech and more tech and more tech, which seems to be like daily, there's all these new processes that we can do that maybe we weren't able to do before. So in the context of today's show, I'm going to share with you that kind of the 5 tips I've surmised that have really helped me, A, crystallize that process, and B, I'm able to apply it to my daily routine, where I feel like I'm actually getting way more done now because of these 5 strategies I'm putting into place. So again, in the context of today's show, understanding that there's a couple of things that we're going to be focusing on. Okay. So one is, as most of you know, we've launched a CRM called Bridger, which is a logistics specific CRM. So I have that business I'm building. I have my freight business, where I need to stay connected to the freight market so I can understand what the needs of sales reps are, needs of managers, needs of executives, in order to build the best software possible, in order to train the people the best way possible, in order to add the courses and the strategies and the tools and the functions and the automation into the system that actually help you, the professional sales rep, get ahead. So with that, then I have another section of my business where I help connect carriers with customers. And so there's these 3 levels of our businesses that we're trying to scale all at the same time. Now, some of you might be like, well, Dan, that's absolutely crazy, but they're also interconnected, that I believe they have to be done together. And this could be, so this thought process here on how to get this done also was compounded for me with the fact that I've lost almost 2 years of my life in what I consider to be 2 years of productivity of my life, trying to get through my cancer treatment. And I know I've spoken about this many times, and we've spoken about it on Data Day with Jeff and everything. And, this idea was really what started to drive me nuts. Is okay, I got these, 17 things to do. So what I've done, just so you guys see, for all of you actually uh, watching the video, and if you're on audio, I've listed out 16 things. When I first did this whole process in one of my training programs, so I listed out 16 things that I really want to get better at, that I believe are priorities in our business to help it grow. Now, I've got these 16 things right here. Now, when I listed these out, the first thing that hit me was overwhelm. And I'm pretty sure if you sit down and you say, okay, what are my priorities to get me to that next level? And here's the difference. And this is what one thing that I learned in these courses that was very big that I never really did, is we're not thinking of today. And this was a big one, is we're thinking of the end result. Where do we need to be at the end result, right? One of my early mentors always said, we learn into the person we're going to be. And I understood that conceptually. But when you start putting it down on paper, it's like, okay, in 3 years, when I'm at this level, what do I need to know in order to get there? And those become the priorities. And the reason I say that is because, you might think today that like sales is a priority, okay? Which it is, don't get me wrong, prospecting and sales is always a priority, but it's what type of prospecting are you looking at doing to become that sales rep you want to become, right? Because if you're just looking at today, and for most of you, you're going to agree with this, it's the fact that, well, you know what, I'm good. I've got less freight, which means the carriers I have are fine. I'm looking at a cheaper option, right? So if you operate under today, most of the time it's going to be this rate cutting opportunity, not even opportunity, this rate cut rates. So when I say, focus on what it is that you want to be, when you focus on that, everything falls into place. And this is one thing that I knew conceptually, but to wrap your head around it, it was insanely hard. So what I've done is I've distilled all of this down into these 5 steps. So the first step is obviously prioritize the needle movers. So what I did is I wrote down the 16 things that I need to learn in these businesses to help improve the business, right? So one of them was getting better at my sales and marketing, right? So again, these are big ideas, right? Like we're gonna plot these into your top 5 moves kind of thing. So we prioritize the needle movers. What are they in logistics sales, for example? So maybe it's prospecting, but not just prospecting. Maybe look at different ways of prospecting and testing different ways of prospecting. Maybe it's a little bit more automation, or maybe it's a little bit more time blocking, or maybe it's, really getting clear on my productivity schedule and what I want to do and how I want to do it. So these are all needle movers, right? It's not just tasks or to-dos or, big projects that are the needle movers. It's a mindset. It's a productivity process. It's functions, it's tools to help you be productive. So what are those needle movers for you? You know, one thing we've done is we've made Bridger that big needle mover for sales reps. So I speak to sales reps all the time that are stagnant. And I'm like, okay, well, have you ever tried this, this, or this? And I show them the tools in Bridger. And all of a sudden that CRM becomes a priority for them to move the needle. So again, this isn't just tasks. This isn't to-do lists. It's none of that. Now, sorry, let me rephrase it. It is some of that, but it's not, it's like a hybrid. It's a mix between both. So what I started doing is I started looking at everything I need to know, learn, how I need to process. Then what I did, and the big like game changer for me was option number 2, or tip number 2, I guess, which was select 4 to 8 a month, and that's it. Now, what I did was you write down all your priorities. Then what I would suggest you do to start is you select the top 4, and just highlight them. Like whether you have different color highlighters, whatever you want, just select them. And then what I do is I go to my calendar for the month and I block out a week for each one. Now, those are the highest priority. to the fourth highest priority that I see that's going to move my business. Now, this is not a process where you just write it down and you immediately plug it in. You write it down, you think about it, you say, well, how is this going to move my business, right? So when you're writing your priorities down, it's more of a, okay, so if sales and marketing are, prospecting, let's say, is a big priority for you, it's not just prospecting, it's how you're going to prospect. Why is that going to make a difference? What is it going to give you? What is it going to teach you? Is it going to teach you what to do, what not to do, what maybe to create a hybrid of, what works, what doesn't? How are you going to track that? So when you're prioritizing, this is kind of the top level stuff is, okay, so it's sales, but how am I going to track that? So am I going to track my sales calls versus meetings booked? Am I going to track my sales emails versus calls booked? Am I going to, how are we going to track it? Then what we do is we select 4 to 8 a month. Now, the reason I say 4 to 8, that's just a start. So when I first started this 2 months ago, I selected 4. And each one I did every week of the month. And at the end of the month, I realized that, okay, if I speed this up, I can probably get to 2 a week. So I do like a Monday to Wednesday and then a Wednesday afternoon to Saturday evening. And that for me is the 6-day week where I go 3 and 3. So what I do is I select these 4 to 8 tasks and I prioritize them. And what I do even now is I write 4 down in my calendar. And all I do is if I complete one early, I move the second one up. And then I add a fifth one down below for the last week. And as I work through them, so I'm not necessarily blocking myself to the week, but I'm saying to myself, okay, I'm going to select these 4 that are the most important. Then there's 5, 6, 7, 8. And then what I do is I kind of keep moving them up. Now, in the last 3 months, I haven't got to more than 2 a week. That are major learning and rebuilding and smashing old paradigms, building new paradigms, because I found that if I try and do more than 2 a week, sometimes the process doesn't stick. So what I did to help the process stick is I started at the beginning of the week blocking time every day to do this new priority, to take care of it. So again, for example, let's say prospecting is a priority. That doesn't mean that we stop prospecting the way we are doing it right now. So I would block, say, 2 hours in the morning to prospect the way I'm doing it right now. Then I would block 2 hours out after that to learn new ways to prospect. Then the next day, I would do an hour of the normal prospecting, and the second hour, I would try the new stuff. Then I would edit, rework it for the next day, then edit, rework it for the next day, and then edit and rework it for the next day. And by the end of the week, if you're starting on like a Monday, Tuesday, for example, and you're creating a new prospecting process, by the end of the week, you'll know if it works or not. So then what you do is you take that process and you say, okay, that's working. Now, you come into the next week and you're saying, but then what if I'm not done that this week? It's perfect because now you've got that process. You just bring it into the next week if you want improvements on it. And that ability to do that is where we get to that 8, because now you're doing 2 the next week, right? So that's the way I do it. And I look at it and I say, okay, I'm blocking this set of time. Now, here's one thing when it came to that blocking time or sprinkling new strategy into your daily workload. One of the big reasons I've found through this training was we usually, I'm trying to figure out how to succinctly say this to you. We lose track or we get overwhelmed because the majority of things we're trying to do, we have not figured out a way to fit it into our workflow. And what I mean by that is no matter how you operate, there's a workflow that you work on. Your mind is set in a specific order. You do things probably for most days over and over and over, and it's this repetitive task. So, for example, you might have noticed over the last couple of weeks, I've been up and down on these shows, right? And the reason being is I still have not figured out a perfect strategy to fit the shows into my workflow. And what I mean by that is I would block a specific time, right? So again, I know this show is a priority to my business. I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to select how do I create? And so I'll walk through this just with this show because I think it could be a good idea. So I'll walk through the first three, then I'll give you the last two tips, and then I'll walk through the last two when it comes to the logistics life, right? So I said, okay, I need to prioritize the logistics life as a needle mover in my business because the more people I integrate into the podcast, the more people that will come into Bridger, the more people that will come into my courses, the more people. So, how do I give more value to the market so the market gives back, right? And that's really what content is you'll listen to content producers and you'll be like, man, I really agree with that. This person is in line with what I'm thinking. Then you'll be more likely to purchase or to follow that person, to like the page, to reply, to create that camaraderie, right? So I know that. So what I did is I said I need to like really focus on this for a week. So I'm going to select this as week 1. I'm going to block out time every day. And I just stopped there for a second, and I found after 3 weeks it's like this wasn't getting done. And why it wasn't getting done is because it didn't fit into my daily workflow. So what I started doing was thinking of things like, okay, do I go just audio? Because if I go audio, I could put my headphones in, I can turn on my iPhone, just hit record. And as I'm going about my morning, I can talk and speak and share strategies and all that. That would then fit, quick edit, upload, done, right? That was one. And that's what a lot of people do. One of my mentors, he said, I wanted to start a podcast. So what I did was I knew I had a 20-minute drive to and from work. So he started to turn on his iPhone and recorded the podcast while he was driving, right? So again, that fit into his workflow of the day. So when you're talking about learning and education and say you have a drive to work, maybe that fitting into your workflow is more of, well, I'm going to listen to this strategy on my way to work, right? And then all of a sudden now, as you go to work, you're learning this strategy that you can implement at the office, right? That's one. Another one was you might start going for a walk in the morning. Instead of not listening to something, listening to a good book. Like if one of your desired priorities is to start, improving anything you do, books and audiobooks are the perfect way to get there to start because it's consumable anywhere. So when you're going for a walk, maybe instead of not listening to anything, you put on your headphones or your earbuds and you start listening to a book. So that's where I decided where it must fit into my workflow. So how do I get this to fit into my workflow? That's when I started doing some recordings at nighttime. Now, and the reason I say that is because I started blocking from like 9 to 9:30 out, 10 to 10:30 out. And what I was finding is if I would have a meeting or a demo before, it would always go into that time. And once it went into that time, I knew I didn't have enough time to record, edit, produce, and upload. So what happened? I just walked away. I didn't do it that day. And you might say to yourself, well, Dan, that's pretty stupid. And I get it. And I understand that. Maybe stupid's not the right word, but I understand. Like, I know this matters, right? And again, if we go back to the book club and the slight edge, right? It's easy to do, but it's easier not to do, right? So it must fit into your workflow. Like, I believe wholeheartedly that as we walk through these processes and as we walk through that ability to build our business to another level, we really have to fit these things into our workflow. And as we fit them, our workflow adjusts accordingly. Okay. So the fourth big thing, and probably one of the biggest things that kept me going on these particular learning curves, was reminding myself why this was important. So remember at the beginning when I said prioritize, figure out how you're going to do it, what it matters, why it matters, so on and so forth. This reiteration of 1 to 4 just keeps looping, and it keeps looping because if we don't consistently remind ourselves as to why we're doing something, why is it important, what will it help us in the future, until it becomes part of our daily workflow, until it becomes a habit, we will tend to be able to push that off without really causing any issues for the short term. It's only over the long term. So think of it like this. Prior to COVID, prior to the pandemic, you were selling, you were moving, you're moving. Pandemic hits. If you go to 100 people, I can almost guarantee, as sure as this is going to get dark tonight, that 95 to 96 are going to say, no, I never sold during COVID, because so much business was coming to them, right? Now, if you were to remind yourself daily, 3 times a week, twice a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday and Thursday, why cold calling, why prospecting was so important, you probably would have stuck to it. And if you would have done that, you would have had double, even triple the clients right now. Because during the pandemic, clients were used to reaching out to people, not having people reach out to them. So the whole mindset shifted. If you would have not stopped selling, I can guarantee you would have had double, triple, even quadruple the business than you have now, right? So that why became very important at that time. Now, today you might be saying, well, Dan, I'm selling every day, but that's because you fell off the edge of a cliff and now you're trying frantically to get back up, right? That's where overwhelm, that's where all these things happen. So one thing I've done is I've said, okay, I am going to remind myself. So what I did is I took my phone and I every week I take the priorities that I'm doing, and I usually sit down on a Sunday afternoon and I take the priorities and I set reminders for that entire week. And my phone just goes off. This is why you're doing this. This is why you're choosing this. This is why you're choosing this. And that why, I know some of you might be saying, like, come on, Dad, really? But I'm telling you, that why means everything in the long run, like everything, right? And so it's, you're going and you're frustrated. And what I do typically is I write things down on cards, right? So over the last little while, these are all the cards I've written over the last 2 months. And what I do is that week, I take the card that I'm doing for that week, reminding me as to why I'm doing all my top 4 things that month. And I put it in front of me, right on my desk, right here. So anytime that I need it, it's either on my computer or on my desk. So as I'm working and I get frustrated, or maybe for me, a lot of the things I'm doing these days are very technical. They're very automation oriented. It's coding, it's JSON, it's JavaScript, it's all this. So it can get frustrating for somebody just learning it. It can get overwhelmed, and I sometimes sit back and I'm like, I have no idea what that person just said. And at that point, it's much easier to walk away. But I look down and I go, this is the reason why I need to learn it. And all of a sudden, it's a shift, right? It's a complete shift in perspective. Now, once I run through those 4, and I feel like those 4 are concrete, my 5th tip and number 5 is I try and figure out how I can automate as much as possible for the next time. And here's what I mean by that. If I can take any part of my sales sequence and automate it to free up time so I can go back and repeat the beginning stages, I will. Some people say, Dan, don't automate. It's spraying and praying. And there's a big difference between spraying and praying and being very targeted and strategic, and automating, say, the last half of the process. Or automating a process where when somebody does this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. You have to walk through it personally first, but once you've done it, then you can automate it. So for me, being in the digital world, I try and automate as much of that as possible. I try and figure out ways. So I allot time every week for that education to figure out ways. So those are the 5 tips, my friends. So number 1 is prioritize the real big needle movers, right? Really identify, why are they going to move the needle? Why does it matter to me and my business? How does it matter? What does it look like for me in 2 years if I really perfect this? Number 2 is select 4 to 8 every month and lock those in your calendar every week. Take those spots in your calendar. If you finish it early, move the next one up. And you just focus on those 4 to 8. You don't move to number 2 until number 1's complete, right? That's it. Then you block time every day to complete number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, even up to 10, 12, 20 if you want, if you can get them done fast enough, right? Then create a card, maybe it be in your pocket, or a piece of paper that you stick to your computer, or a piece of paper you tape to your desk, whatever the case may be, however it is that you see it. Maybe it's on your bathroom mirror. I don't really care how it is you see it. Maybe you put one on your bathroom mirror, one in your car, and one at your desk. So when you're on your way to work, you see it. When you're at work, you see it. When you're at home, you see it. And to remind yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? Because it's so much easier just to walk into work and go with the flow, right? That's the big thing. When we go to change the way we do things, we have to constantly remind ourselves why, because it's easier just to give up on it and go back to our status quo, our standard, the thing that's comfortable, the thing that doesn't pull us out of our comfort zone, right? And then number 5 is figure out how to automate it some which way, shape, or form. Somehow automate half the processes, automate 3/4 of the process, hell, automate it all, right? I've often said automate, delegate, delete, the ADD mentality. So figure that piece out. If it's rating customers, figure out a way to automate it, meaning when an email comes in, you can figure out tools that you can actually use, functions you can use in your email when it hits keywords like, can you give me this rate, or can I get a rate on this? It automatically emails it out to the team. So, and these are just simple things, but when you think about it, they add up. So if you're getting 10, 15 emails a day or 5 emails a day for rates, and you're finding, you're taking a minute or two to send it, and you want to save that 30, 40 minutes a week that you can add to something else and learn, then set up automation tools to send those emails out. All sorts of stuff. I mean, when you really start looking at your workflows and how you move through your day, you can figure out ways to automate almost any of it. Right? Literally almost any of it. Like, you can have it so when a client says, hey, is it possible for us to get together? It can trigger an email that goes back to the client and says, absolutely, I'd love to. Here's my calendar link. Choose a time and date that works for your schedule and let's go. So now you're not even sending that email back. It's automatically replying through your email system because you're setting up automation tools, right? Simple things like this. You start doing this 5, 6, 7, 8 different paths. Everything gets answered. Everything moves without you having to do it. So if each task is 5 minutes a day, and say you set up 5 different tasks or 4 different tasks, right? Or 6 different tasks, whatever the case may be, you can free 35, 40 minutes a day, which equals an extra 2.5 weeks of full productivity a year just from automating. So automation isn't just like prospecting facing stuff. Automation comes at every level of the business. Every level of the business. Like, if you have tools that have webhooks or API calls, you can use things like Zapier or make.com, like all of these different tools, but it's a matter of understanding them and learning and prioritizing. How do I free up more time? So maybe that's one of your priorities this month is how do I free up more time in my day to get more things done? That's a big priority, I think, in today's business, because if we can come into the office, or if we can sit down at our desk and create the output of 2 people, we're doubling our results at the end of the year. I hope that makes sense, my friends. Remember, go out there, make every call educational, and crush your sales. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care.